Life throws us challenges, but true strength is found pushing through. Today, we'll dive into the story of resilience and perseverance that demonstrates that no obstacle is too great to overcome. We'll get into it after I hit this music. Joining me this week is breast cancer survivor and the founder of the company Pure Steel, Karen Rodriguez. Karen, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Karen, tell us about how you started Pure Steel.
Oh gosh, okay. Pure Steel started, I think, at one of the darkest moments in my life. I was sitting in the chemo room with other people having chemo, and I just had like a vision of wanting to, I guess, make a change, find a way, like, how could I help other people kind of avoid the situation I had gotten into um, by my own health choices, and how I could find a way to give back to helping others in that same situation that I had currently found myself in. And it was just kind of like a thought at the time. I didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't know how it would transpire, but it was like a desire, you know what I mean, to help
Yeah.
others. That's kind of where it started, the at the very basic step of it.
So, when you got diagnosed with breast cancer, how long is this timeline when you decided to start your own business?
So I was diagnosed in July of 2020. It was like right in the heart of COVID. And I first started chemo. Well, first I got a port. It was like this whole like felt like 20,000 step journey, right? But so I got my port, I believe, that same July. In August, they were getting me um, ready to start chemo, and I believe by like mid-August, I was already doing chemo. Just everything went so quickly. So I would say it was about like a month into chemo, and just feeling the dread in the room,
Yeah.
just seeing so many other patients, so hopeless, you
Yeah.
know.
What was your life like before your diagnosis?
Oh, very busy. I'm a mother of 7 children, and we own our own business other than Pure Steel. We have a structural steel ornamental iron construction company. And so it was always, my business, my children. I never really took the time for myself, for my health. I knew I kind of like always in my head, I would say, okay, I gotta be more healthy. I gotta take time. I gotta exercise. I gotta think about myself. But I almost felt guilty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh, then
Yep.
I'd have to take time from the kids to then focus on myself. And I almost felt guilty about that as a mother. Because the running a business already required so much of my time that it was like by the time I got home, I didn't want to be like, okay, hey guys, I'm gonna go, work out. It was like my time was dedicated to them.
Yeah. So, when you got the diagnosis, how did that change your life before your idea?
Well, it was
Like, did
like,
you did you isolate yourself? Did you?
you, you know, my mother did that. So we had lost my mom to small cell bladder cancer like a year prior. And I watched her do that. She just kind of like withdrew herself from the family, from, even going out in public. She was scared. They tell you, be careful, you can get sick. And so when I saw her do that, and she just declined so fast at that point that I was like, okay, I wanted to deal with it differently. I didn't want to see my kids to see me like shut down or lose my hope. Um, I didn't want my kids to see me in fear of death. So the only
Yeah.
other option was to just go at it like the opposite direction, combat it full speed head on. And so I didn't want them to have the vision of my mom, how cancer just took her. I wanted them to have a different vision um, of cancer, that like you could fight it, you know?
Yeah. So, what goes through your head when you're told Karen, you have cancer, like what's all the thoughts that are going through your head at that moment?
Oh my gosh, it's like the whole grieving process. Like, okay, this can't be real. Like, and I remember asking, how do you know? Because I had tried to get an appointment for several months, with it being COVID, a lot of the doctors were canceling appointments, things like that. And so finally, when I got in, the doctor, just by feeling the lump, was told me, "Hey, this is cancer." And I was like, "This can't be." Like, I went through denial.
Yeah.
How do you even know? Like, just by feeling it, like, how do you know it's cancer? It can't be cancer. And they're like, no, it's cancer. And so I went through, I think, like a lot of denial at first, and then it was like fear, and I thought, okay, I can either like sit here in this fear, which is not gonna, bring about anything positive, or I can combat it, just face the fear head on and give it my best shot at overcoming, fighting it. I focused a lot on like what the steps the doctors had given me. So it was like, take it one step at a time. Like, first, okay, we're going to do chemo, and then we're going to do mastectomy, and then we're going to do radiation. And so I just kind of one step at a time, only bit it off like as I got to each step.
Okay. So was it during the kind of that dark period of time that your idea popped in your head about starting this business, or was that idea always was that kind of always a plan before you were diagnosed?
Well, I think like it's kind of the true heart of who I am at the end of the day, wanting to help people. But it came into my mind then, like, how could I somehow change the cycle? So many people in that room were young, younger than myself, even battling cancers. Like, how does this happen? And I didn't know quite then at the time that we were going to end up, being a gym equipment manufacturing company. That came later, like in my last step of my cancer journey, which was to lose weight because my cancer was hormone driven. And being, I was like 90 pounds heavier then. I had a lot of extra estrogen in my body. And so the cancer was just like feeding off that estrogen.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until then I got on my own fitness journey and teamed up with my trainer, who helped me get my weight under control, then where I was able to get my estrogen numbers lower, which kind of, put the cancer on hold. That I started to realize how important exercise was to both, mentally, physically. It's like kind of at that point I realized it's kind of all tied together.
Yeah.
And then my husband saw the change and he was like, wait a second, I need to do that. So he started coming to the gym with me, met my trainer. They started talking about how, we're a steel manufacturing company. He's like, I can make this stuff so much better than what you have. Like, this is 22 gauge steel and I can make it out of like, a quarter-inch thick or whatever. And from there, it was like, hey, that kind of ties with my whole story, my journey to getting myself healthy, my husband who loves manufacturing steel. And so we're like, well, why don't we try and create this company and then also use it as a means to give back. So a portion of everything that we sell, we actually donate back to Susan
Okay.
G. Komen.
Awesome.
So
I'm gonna get more into your business here in a bit, but I really want to know that mindset you had because basically you had two options. Well, it sounds like you had two options. You could be miserable about yourself and feel bad about yourself that you got, breast cancer, or you you can say, well, I'm not going to let this define my life. I'm going to keep pursuing my goals. Like, was there something else that helped you overcome that challenge of from being able to stop grieving to keep living your life?
faith, I think, had a big part of it. My friends, my family, I really had a really great support group, even like my doctors, my nurses, um, just I think connecting with people, and finding my faith within myself, you know, to to like believe, hey, there's got to be something good that can come from all of this bad,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like a desire to not become just another number or statistic, just a desire to inspire others, like, hey, you can fight this. You know, uh,
Yeah. Yeah. So when reading your story, because of your cancer diagnosis, I learned that there are certain exercises that you couldn't do. So you actually invented a piece of equipment to help people suffering maybe the same issues. Tell us what that was.
so I could do normal sit-ups and things like that, but there was like an ab roller, the one with the single wheel in the gym, and I would see people using it, and I saw they would get some good results with that, so I wanted to use the piece of equipment myself. However, I couldn't because um, being stage 4 breast cancer, it's not only in, my chest, but it's in my hips and my spine. And so you really can't put a lot of pressure on those areas. There's always a fear in the back of my mind. I hear my doctor like, you got to be careful. You don't want to break your hip. And I'm like, oh yeah, I don't want to do that. And so we created, it's actually a 4-wheel ab roller that gives you some support here on your elbow. So it adds extra stability. It puts the exercise more in your core than in your lower back, and it takes the pressure off the hips. So I'm really proud of the piece of equipment that we created because it's so easy for anybody to use,
Yeah, and what's that?
including myself. So
What's the name of that piece of equipment?
for up to this point, we've just called it like the Pure Steel ab roller, but
Okay,
we're actually giving it a name. We're calling it the Phoenix. And the
the
reason we're
Phoenix.
calling it the Phoenix is, the rising from the ashes. So
Yeah, I love
yeah,
it.
yeah, to kind of go along with my story. That was actually my team's idea. It wasn't even my idea, but
Yeah,
um, I feel it's very touching that they would think to name that the Phoenix, because I relate so much to the Phoenix and the rising from the ashes. So
yeah. So this product, is it currently available right now to purchase, or are you still in the beginning phases?
we actually launched it the beginning of this year. So it's actually available to purchase. And we're actually working on like a more difficult version of it. So we're going from 4 wheels to 2 wheels for like a more advanced model.
Okay. So, because of your diagnosis, would you ever thought of this idea if it wasn't for your diagnosis?
I don't think so. I don't think I I don't think so because well, I probably would have just been down there using the normal, ab
Yeah.
wheel. Yeah. Yeah. So we actually came up with it together with my husband and my trainer. And so, but I don't think we would have been in that circumstance had it not have been for my own
Yeah.
journey, Yeah.
I think that's so cool how something negative can turn out to be something positive.
Yeah.
And here you invented a piece of equipment that's going to help so many other people with the same issues with their hips or spine that they can't put pressure on it. You solved the issue. That's
Yes.
awesome.
Yes. And I think like working out, it should be for everybody, it doesn't hurt anyone for sure. I know that like even in my darkest moments, during chemo was pretty rough. I remember there would be days like I didn't even have the energy to put my feet on the floor. And I'd literally have to count down like, okay, I'm gonna do this on the count of 3, like 1, 2, 3, and I'd put my feet on the ground. But then I would get up and I would get moving and I would feel better. And so um I just would inspire others to do that. And even like
Yeah.
when you're in a mentally dark place, that's almost even more challenging, I think, when you're just in those dark, depressed moments. But even getting out and like being outdoors and walking, that just helped clear my mind so much. And then after struggling with cancer and now having these kind of, I don't know if you would label it like a disability, but like not the not being capable to use some of the equipment that's out there, and then being able to create something like this, um, I feel very, very proud. Like you said, it's
Yeah.
like taking something that was so dark and then having something positive come from that place in my life.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about your mindset about being in a dark place, where there's some days where you just don't want to get up. And we know that exercise increase dopamine, which if dopamine you can get from food, whatever makes you happy, which
Hmm.
you really don't want to get dopamine from food. That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
But you can get from exercise. But like if someone's in a really bad place, how like is there things that you tell yourself to make you get up and do it anyways? Or is there any tips or tricks to just go do something to feel better? I feel like that when you're struggling with mental health, especially as a breast cancer, that depression's got to be heavy.
It really
So
was. Yeah. And
yeah,
there's times it was like so limiting. Like I felt like I kind of lost myself to the sickness. There were things that I was able to do before that I couldn't do. I remember as I was healing and I had already gone through, the the chemo, the mastectomy, the radiation. I was on the healing side of it. I remember one day I was like sad and feeling like, gosh, I just want to be normal again, because you hear that so often, no, you're new normal,
yeah,
you're new normal. And my dad was like, what's wrong? And I was like, I just wish I could go surfing again. And he goes, well, go do it. And I was like, yeah, oh, true. Like, what's stopping me? Me, I'm stopping
yeah,
me, right? And so I was like, okay. And a little bit afraid, right? Maybe not as good as I used to be, but I love the ocean. I'm like, I'm just going to get out there and go do it, and it was so hard the first time, to push
yeah,
myself to get out there and do something that now I was afraid of, but I thought, can't let that control my life. I don't want to get stuck here. So I guess it's like asking myself the question, like, is this where the zone I want to live in? Like, do I want to live in this zone of fear? And
yeah.
then grabbing, onto my faith and with the help of my family and friends, them like, hey, let's go, I'll go with you, then getting myself there the first time and finding that I actually enjoy myself. Well, it makes it easier then to go back the next time because I had a good experience the, that first time going back. So,
Any advice to get that friend or family member out of the bed, out of the house, to get them feeling like themselves again, even though that they may not want to?
it's so difficult. It's like they say, right? You can lead the horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. So it's kind of like finding that balance, I think. Um, a lot of my children struggle with their mental health. And I think for me, like as a mom and someone who cares, like I always want to fix it for them, right? So I would
Yeah.
get like frustrated. I want to fix it. And sometimes I think it's just a matter of just listening, maybe not having the answer or the piece of advice, maybe just listening to where they're at
Okay.
and then maybe taking it little steps at a time. Like, hey, sometimes when people are really in those dark places, it's really hard for them to just even get out of the house, right? Let alone drive, for me anyways, like 50 miles to the beach, or maybe just, hey, we would take my daughter and I would take rides just to Starbucks, to the Starbucks drive through. It was just like kind of like to get her out of the house. Those were during COVID time. I had a daughter who got really depressed. And so it was like, I knew she liked coffee, she liked Starbucks, you know. Sometimes she
Yeah.
actually enjoyed driving. So I'd be like, hey, you want to drive me to Starbucks? And just that drive to Starbucks and letting her talk and
Yeah.
express some of her feelings. Just start small, I think.
Yeah. And you mentioned something about your daughter being depressed. How did your family take your diagnosis? Like, how'd that impact your family's mental health?
Um, I think like with my husband, a lot of times, well, I personally have experienced depression. I don't know if he has because he tends to be like, oh, that's not real. It's like, no,
Yeah.
mental health is very real. But I think unless we experience it ourselves, a lot of times it's hard. Maybe it's awkward to know how to address those issues. So you kind of just brush it off like, you know,
Yeah.
um, and so I've noticed that like created a real strain on their relationship. but yet it's hard because the strain for me was like I didn't want to feed into it too much either, because then I would be the
Hmm.
opposite extreme where then you give it a name and you give it all this power, and then it's so hard to, pull them out of there. So it's just so hard to find that middle ground, maybe I found that maybe like a pet might help, right? A lot of times
Yeah.
with at least my kids, um, like I said, getting outside, going for a walk, breathing fresh air, then it really does, or has for my kids, help them like, oh, okay, like I did make it around the block this time. Maybe next time we could do a block and a half or two
Yeah.
blocks. Yeah. So, but
Okay. Yeah. So before you finish up here, I want to learn more about your company, Pure Steel. So you've been running this company before your diagnosis, correct? Or this started after?
this started after. This started
Oh,
like,
the whole company started after your
yeah,
diagnosis.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it
Okay.
started like in the middle of my fitness journey because I had to lose all that weight. I actually lost 90 pounds. And so it was during that journey that I started to realize how important fitness was. And then my husband met my trainer. And remember, my husband was like, "Oh, this is crap equipment. Like, it's like you shake it, and it's like, how am I supposed to exercise on, this pull-up bar if it's like shaking? I can make it better than this." And that's kind of where it started, was during that portion of my journey.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so you didn't just invent a piece of equipment. You
No.
started a whole fitness company,
Yes.
all because of
Yes.
your
Yes.
diagnosis.
Yes. Yes. So we wanted to first of all create a product that made in America. Very proud of that,
Yeah.
and that's made to last. I almost feel like, I don't know, in the 80s, like stuff, at least furniture, you bought your furniture and it lasted like your lifetime, right? And so we kind of wanted to create a product that was like that. So any of our equipment, we can make benches, racks, plate loaded machines, but the machinery that we did make, our mindset is like, okay, this should be in the gym and for the life of the gym, not like, oh, I got to
Yeah.
buy something new every year. And so
So
then
what was your job before your diagnosis again?
I actually ran all of the accounting for our construction company.
Okay, so your
So
husband had a construction company.
yes,
You ran the
yes,
accounting.
yes. So we were
And
already
now you
fabricating, manufacturing steel, just on a different scale, like the big
yeah.
beams and guardrails and fencing and all of that stuff on some of the construction jobs, apartments. We've done work at like dealerships, things like that. So
So does your husband still do that as well, or are you guys solely focusing on your fitness business?
he mostly does all the manufacturing now for the fitness business because we have the other
Okay,
company. It's already running full speed. It's been in business now
perfect.
21 years. And so that's kind of like runs itself. And now we're kind of focused on this new fitness equipment company. So
So I want to hear from you. What was the positive of getting diagnosed with breast cancer? Because usually you don't hear people saying anything positive about it. What was the
you know,
positive for you?
it the positive for me was I've now been dealt with it twice. So the first time I think I learned to like it strengthened my faith in the sense that I learned to like be thankful and praise even through the bad times, right? Because it's easy when
Yep.
everything's easy, but I learned like, hey, there's still if there's pleasure in like the simple joys of like, I don't know, like I said, driving down the street talking to your daughter to get a coffee. Maybe those are moments I would have overlooked before, and um definitely, honestly, I think for me a big win is I used to think I was a wimp. I'm like, oh, I'm the
Yeah.
wimpiest person I know, and now I can say, hey, I'm not a wimp. Like I fought so hard and here I am. So that takes a stronger person than I thought I was. So it's like celebrating those little victories, like, hey, I did that. I made it through that. I can make it through this. Or, almost feel like, and then when cancer came at me the second time, so it went from my right hip to my left hip to my spine, it was like, okay, like I got this,
Yeah.
I'm strong. So it was no longer like I'm a wimp. It was like, no, I'm strong. I can handle this. So
I love it. And you got a whole new business out there that helps
yes,
other
yes,
people. That's
Yes.
so awesome.
Yeah.
Um, Before we wrap it up, Karen, do you have any last thoughts you want to push through this episode that you want people to know about, dealing with breast cancer? Um, I guess how to handle the news when you get it.
I would say that it's very important to find the things that like ground you, right? Like for me, it is my faith, my family, um, and hold on to those things. None of us are promised every day anyways. Is like
Yeah,
even driving home yesterday, we saw a fatal motorcycle accident. You know what I mean? So we never know how long we have anyway. So I would just say make the most of every moment you have with your children or your spouse or your, any family member, any friend. Um, I've learned through the journey, maybe just stop and take a moment and ask people, hey, how are you doing? Because a lot of times in taking the focus of myself, looking at someone else and how can I help them also helped me because you form deeper relationships, new friendships a lot of times, and you learn things that you probably would have not learned if you're living your life in such a hurry, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are right. We're not guaranteed tomorrow or the next hours. So,
Yeah.
so why stress over something that's going to happen to everybody anyways? We're all going to pass away. We don't know when it's going to happen. So why worry about it? And not trying to make light of cancer, but it's just another obstacle that we have to face in life, and you face it head on. We all have obstacles no matter what. So, I mean, I think it's great that you found a negative in your life turned to a positive, and now you're running a fitness business, which is, and you invented a new product.
Yeah. And
That's
it
so
doesn't
cool.
necessarily just have to be a business. You could um those dark moments that we go through, we can use those experiences also to help others around us. And then that also kind of gives
Yes.
us fulfillment as well. It's like,
Yeah.
I know some people don't have the means to just go create a business, but, y- you know,
No.
nobody can help another person like someone who's been through it, you
Yep.
know? And so that's what I encourage my children because I know, like I said, they all struggle with either it's health anxiety or depression. I always tell them, you're going to get through this. And when you're on the other side of this, you're going to be able to help someone else who's struggling in that same position. And it feels good.
Yeah.
It feels
It
good
does.
when you're able to help others. So.
Yeah, and helping people can just be something simple as saying thank you in the grocery store.
Mhm.
You know, let him cut through. Let him cut through the line. It doesn't
Mhm.
it can be
It's
whatever
true.
it wants,
It
and it
really
builds
is
up.
true.
It builds up over
Yes.
time.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Perfect. Karen, if people want to learn more about your products or find you on social media, how can they do that?
We are on Instagram at Pure Seal Inc. And then our website is www.puresealinkusa.com. So either
Perfect.
of those.
And if you're listening to my podcast, you'll find those links in the show description. Otherwise, if you're watching on YouTube, you saw it go past your screen. Karen, I want to thank you again so much for sharing us your darkest moment in life and how you overcame it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I just hope someone finds encouragement to just keep fighting,